if it's so, I'll say unequal, the pipelines, where people with one worldview, conservatives, uh, can't enter one, or the one that they have is so much smaller than all of the other ones. Uh, can policymakers maybe do something about it too? I mean, these are all tax. If the tax advantages only go into one worldview, can't a policymaker furrow an eyebrow about that?
Yeah, this is not my area of expertise, and so to some extent, I'm less familiar with the policy tools when it comes to looking at 501(c)(3)s. But at the very least, you could make an argument like this. These programs are often using a kind of pretext to do what they can't they're not allowed to do because of civil rights law. American civil rights law does not allow universities to hire on the basis of race. A lot of foundations, especially over the last 10 years, have said our mission is in some way connected to kind of a crude demographic goal that we need to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in academia. But a foundation or, well, a university can't just come out and say, we're going to hire 10 African American scholars. But they can say we're going to hire 10 scholars who show a commitment to diversity, or 10 scholars in a cluster hire focused on, African American studies. And everyone involved, to some extent, is open about what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a demographic outcome using race, or using proxies for race. And now this is actually a legal gray area. If in a different situation, you kind of reversed the roles a little bit, and you had say a Southern university right after the Civil Rights Act was passed, start to use proxies for race to exclude African Americans, that would be seen, that would law enforcement, or investigators, or private individuals, they would go after that. They would find legal ways to challenge that, and that's the whole reason that the doctrine of disparate impact was created in the first place. And now there's a good argument to be made that a lot more scrutiny can be paid to that kind of thing, or just to as far as I know, the current administration's big, monumental actions towards all these different institutions, it's really bypassed foundations right now. It really hasn't taken a deep look. And I think it's worth taking a deep look at whether foundations have actually encouraged, through these pipeline programs, encourage universities to actually break the law, or knowingly funded programs that are in fact in some ways in violation of the law. I think that that's one policy tool to be used to kind of address the underlying issue.
Mhm. And then just another policy area. I won't ask you to make any recommendations or anything like that, but sometimes you said scrutiny. Are these transparency is an issue in philanthropy, and what levels of transparency attach to different kinds of flows of money. But can you just describe, as you do your research, some of the problems you have with transparency as you try to look into these tax advantage funding flows?
It's very difficult to get any information about what Mellon Foundation or any other group is doing. The reason that I've been able to kind of crack the code just a little bit is because I have at my disposal state level public records laws that allow me to go to state universities and request grant proposals and grant progress reports. And those are the primary basis for the research and the article that we're talking about. It's just I've methodically gone to universities and asked them for these records, and often then it doesn't I don't get the results that I wish I did. Some universities have said that it'll take them so long, it'll cost thousands of dollars to produce these grant proposals, which is kind of silly given that other universities give them to me in a matter of a week or two.
Mhm.
Some universities say that the grant was actually given to the university's foundation, which is not a public institution. It's this other private entity, and so they say it's not a public, it's not a public record. And of course, there are some states that just have more stringent disclosure laws, so they don't give those they don't give it away freely just because they don't have to. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of just kind of going through the almost a legal process to get this information. And even then there are a lot of questions that are left unanswered. You'll notice in the article I requested a comment and didn't receive one. They don't have any reason they have to give me a comment. So in some ways it's a black box and we just have to do our best to see what's going on behind the scenes.
Just out of curiosity, which institutions might have been more responsive to you than not?
Yeah, so this is largely dependent on state public records laws, and somewhat to my surprise, the universities in Illinois are very responsive, and that's because their state public records laws require them to they have a pretty quick mandatory turnaround. The same goes for New Mexico. It's really just a random assortment of states. Interestingly, usually the state of Texas is great on this because they also have a pretty quick required turnaround. But when it comes to grant records, you can't get anything. They refer to these as private contracts, which are exempt from their disclosure laws. So you could spend a lot of time talking to me about
Yeah.
about the process of getting public records. There's a lot of info there.
Do you, John, even try to ask private universities for information regarding their philanthropic support?
No, I mean, if I asked for the grant proposals, they would laugh at me. If I had some information, I would and was going to write about them, I would certainly go for a request for comment. But I think otherwise, with private universities, I'm really more reliant on faculty members who have inside information being willing to provide that. So I'm always on the lookout for that. I'm always on the lookout for individuals who are just willing to kind of share with me what they've experienced or what they've seen, or maybe some kind of roundabout ways to acquire public records, because there are some interesting ways to do that. Sometimes somebody at one institution will ask somebody at a public institution to be a part of a grant, and so they will end up acquiring, being emailed the grant proposal, and then you can acquire it by requesting that email. But that just requires a ton of inside information. It's a little bit trickier to figure out that kind of thing.
Yeah. Why did Mellon get your attention? Are they bigger, or are their projects, more I don't know, out there or more radical or something? Why Mellon
Yeah,
compared to
I
others?
would say, initially, I just started to notice that I would run across news articles about the Mellon Foundation giving grants, and the projects would be titled things like social justice curriculum at UCLA, or the intersectional studies collective. Just on their face, these grants seemed to be more ideological. But really, the trend that I've been pointing out for throughout this series has been that universities will have found kind of roundabout, extremely clever tools to bypass institutional actors within universities who might create friction or might oppose the sort of social justice advocates who are on campus. And one of the ways that that's been done a lot over the past 10 years and 15 years, I guess, is through a special tool that I call the Fellow to Faculty program, where universities hire postdoctoral fellows, and then they create a program that gives those postdoctoral fellows either a kind of that strongly favors them for a tenure track faculty position, or just promises them a tenure track faculty position. And now this is really interesting because usually if a university is going to hire a professor, it falls to the department to select who that professor is. But if you as a university administrator are given a separate pot of money, and you're told essentially that you can fund these special hires that take place kind of outside the usual strictures of a departmental faculty search, that allows that essentially just allows a different group of people to select those scholars. And so the Mellon Found it, I first noticed that and began to talk to people about that mechanism. And a lot of professors told me that, yeah, we're in a lot of cases strong-armed into hiring people that we wouldn't necessarily otherwise have hired because we have this fellow to faculty mechanism and this extra pot of money. Our dean will tell us, we don't have any faculty jobs for you this year unless you would like to hire from our fellow to faculty pool. And so I saw that happening a lot. And then I realized that, oh, look at the University of California system. They have the biggest fellow to faculty program in the country. Who funds it? Well, the Mellon Foundation gave a $15 million grant for the program in 2021. You look at the University of Chicago, the University of Virginia, Wayne State University. You go down the list of universities that employ this tool. It's not all of them, but a lot of them are funded to some extent by the Mellon Foundation. So they've done it's in some ways it's been a very impressive program for kind of packing the faculty across the country with people who are aligned with their vision for higher education.
Mm-hmm. So separate and apart from us being hypothetical policymakers who are conservative that might want to do something about this. What if we're just hypothetical conservative philanthropists? Let's pretend we're rich, John. And what could be done? What would you recommend be considered by them? Like Koch has tried to support higher education. How's that gone? And should conservatives just cede the field or try to create their own universities, or what would be on the menu of options?
Well, look, I think that actually, to some extent, the people who have developed this sort of model have given conservatives a model that can be emulated. Not entirely, because I think that the goal that a lot of conservatives have is to restore academic freedom, and so you can't just run roughshod over academic freedom in the way that a lot of these programs I think have. But at the same time, I think a lot of universities are especially open right now to the argument that there's not really ideological diversity, and doing things to increase ideological diversity would actually be really good. And so the shining example of something that's kind of like a conservative pipeline in the United States right now would be these civics institutes at various universities, state universities, that more and more of them are being developed. UNC Chapel Hill has one. The University of Florida has one. UT Austin has one. And these institutes, they seem to clearly be selecting faculty who are just committed to the traditional vision of the university. And they're recruiting really solid faculty. So there is a little bit of a model. I would say supporting something like that goes a long way. But that's not the limit to what you can do. And I think places like the Mellon Foundation show us that. They don't just support one form of faculty hiring. They support something called cluster hiring, where it's just a kind of faculty hiring program. They also support postdoctoral fellowships that put faculty in specific departments, not just in their own set-aside program like the civics programs are. They support undergraduate fellowships. They support graduate fellowships. And they support, on the other end, administrator development programs. And right now, there aren't a lot of administrator development programs in the United States that prioritize people who say, hey, I think the university is about the pursuit of truth, and I think that the university should prioritize the classical liberal arts and should have a really strong, robust understanding of what excellence means. There aren't many programs that identify those people and say, we're going to find a way to help you kind of get on the administrator pipeline. But a university administrator, just a regular dean or provost, those are the people who make more of a difference in a university than anyone else, certainly more than a DEI office. And so it's important to recognize that even though there are places where a pipeline for a different kind of university professor has been constructed, there are so many rungs of the ladder, and those other rungs, I think we're nowhere near the the kind of endpoint where we've developed out as many interesting and successful strategies as we could. There are a lot more to try out, and that I think I would say that this is the top priority for higher ed reform. I don't think that there's anything more important than this.
Mhm. Well, unless there's something I didn't ask or that you want to say, I'm willing to go ahead and say thanks, John Saylor, for doing this with us. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was very fun.